Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in to Leadership Matters with the People's Doctors, informing leaders, inspiring solutions. I'm Sheryl White, and I'm going to be your lead co-host for today, but delighted to have our co-host with me, Dr. Dre. Welcome,
Hello,
welcome.
hello, hello.
And Dr. Loretta.
Hi, Dr. Cheryl.
Also pleased to have joining us today our special guest, Kathryn Shade. Kathryn is the Director of Human Resources at the National Conflict Resolution Center based here in San Diego, California. So, Kathryn, welcome to Leadership Matters.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Before we jump into today's episode, we'll start with our audience questions. And Dr. Dre, I think I'm going to turn to you first, and
Okay.
then Dr. Loretta, then our special guest, if you'd like to respond afterwards, we'd love to hear your voice as well. So
Sure.
this guest question says, my supervisor often causes chaos and conflict by giving staff overlapping assignments. She says one thing to one person and something different to me. This is very frustrating. What should I do? Dr. Dre.
Wow. Good. Another good question from the audience. Can be very, very frustrating and really overall erodes trust. Obviously, as part of that process. I would just go back and ask for clarity from the one who gave the assignment. I mean, when you know you've received an assignment that overlaps with the colleagues, I avoid collision, right? And why are we doing the same thing? Why are we working on the same thing? Why are we wasting time and valuable resources? So I would go back to the supervisor, whomever it is, and ask for clarity. I want to make sure I understand the priorities. What's my role in this? I understand my colleague is also working on something similar, so I want to make sure I'm supporting either that other person or if I should be taking the lead, or is there a separate deliverable in terms of what you're expecting from me? So again, good, honest communication in order to avoid the conflict that's going to turn into just a collision and chaos, and we get nowhere fast. And so I think the clear case here is for this listener to understand we want to reduce ambiguity without putting our supervisor or boss on defense and do it in a professional, respectful manner. So that's how I would respond to that.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Dre. Dr. Loretta, anything you'd add?
Yeah. I agree with Dr. Dre. The one thing that I would add, and it's because of who I am, you know me, Dr. Cheryl, I'm going to
Mhm.
document. It's like the overlapping. I want to document, not to say I got you or anything, but just to make sure that is this a pattern or is it a one-time thing that happened? But if it's a pattern, then I would like to go and have that conversation with the person and say, hey, I noticed this pattern. Why, do we keep overlapping? Is there something I'm missing? Or ask for the clarity. But I'm gonna say document it just to make sure that it really is something I'm noticing and it's not, just a one-time thing.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Loretta. Catherine, anything you might add?
I agree with both of them, and I think like Dr. Loretta, I like to be, well, I'll say I like to be explicit, and don't be afraid to ask explicit, specific questions,
Mhm.
and say, manager, supervisor, I feel like there's some chaos and confusion being, um, happening here because it seems like you are giving myself and my colleague
Mhm.
overlapping assignments, like that clarity, put it
Mhm.
out in the open, put it in the air, and ask for that clarity without putting people on the defense. So without saying, look, you are just causing chaos and confusion, say,
Mhm.
this is what we are experiencing. And we really would just like some clarity moving forward so that we can work together more collaboratively.
Great, and I agree with each of those. I might add that sometimes colleagues can work amongst themselves and
Yeah.
align themselves with regards to where that overlap, if that's possible, and then serve that up and say, "Hey, looks like so and so's working on this part. I'm working on this part. Is that what you had in mind?" So sometimes the best way to manage up is to collaborate with your colleague if the
Hmm.
lines of communication are open there. Because the goal is to get the alignment, and that's what each of you have said, to define that overlap. So awesome. Thank you. Thank you. So before we dive deeper, and thank you to our listening audience And we appreciate when you send in questions and encourage you to continue to do so. Before we dive deeper into our conversation for today, and we will go through a second audience question a little later, but I'd love to have Kathryn so that our listening audience can get a sense as to who she is and the perspective that you bring, Kathryn, to have you maybe just share a little bit about your leadership journey and your connection to this topic of mediation.
Absolutely. Well, I have been with the National Conflict Resolution Center just surpassed 9 years here. I started with
Congratulations.
NCRC, thank you, actually doing community engagement. So we have a space, an office in Southeastern San Diego, where we were invited to come into the community to help with some very difficult and challenging community issues, particularly around over law enforcement in our communities. And we did a whole series of community conversations. Um, and then we created trainings and really community spaces where we would bring law enforcement and community together to have these, sometimes difficult conversations. And whenever I help to facilitate those conversations, first off, I let law enforcement know this is not a gotcha. Like we are being very authentic in wanting to bring community and law enforcement together to have conversations and find areas of commonality, where is our common ground, and then also to be able to have honest and difficult conversations about issues or concerns that each had with the other. And inevitably, at the end of these trainings, there would be hugs, there would be, we need a lot more of this. And so just helping people to understand that having honest and open conversations, which are facilitated so that they do not get out of hand and people have a common understanding of what the goal of the conversation is, was very, very fulfilling. And so after doing that for about 5 years, I moved into the human resources role here at NCRC, which is a role that I also very much embrace because I help to be a part of creating a culture within our organization, a culture of belonging, a culture of, equity and diversity, um, and a culture where people feel welcome, where they can show up as they are, as their best selves. And to help build transparency within the organization where people feel safe to ask questions, to question things, to be part of the collaboration of how, the direction of the organization. So it's a role that I really embrace. I think having those just natural people skills and knowing what will be a good fit for our organization is where I thrive.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Dre.
Yeah, thank you, Kathryn. Again, glad to have you on the show today.
Thank you.
One question that comes up for me is, what does it mean to you that conflict is inevitable, but escalation is optional? I mean, does that even make sense? And does conflict have to be inevitable, I guess?
It makes perfect sense. We believe that conflict is an inevitable part of all human relationships, and it absolutely is, whether it is in your household, as a child or with your children, there's going to be conflict in the workplace, out in the community, sometimes just at Costco, right?
Yeah.
So conflict is an inevitable part of human relationships, and it doesn't always have to be negative. So it is inevitable, and escalation is kind of a choice.
Mm.
And often people think that is the only choice, it becomes sort of a defense mechanism. And so we believe that people can be taught and trained how to de-escalate situations where there is conflict. Conflict just means we aren't necessarily on the same page about something. We don't have the same perspective on a particular issue or situation, and helping people to find a common ground so they can even open the conversation with one another. And then skills and tools to learn how to de-escalate. Like your only option is not to escalate this and to be right. but to really listen to how someone arrived at their perspective, be able to take that into account, and then have a very meaningful and authentic response.
I'd love to de-escalate, double click on the de-escalation skills. And I think we'll do that a little later in our conversation. So I won't stop us now. Thanks, Dr. Dre, and thank you, Kathryn. Dr. Loretta.
Okay. All right, Kathryn, I'm enjoying everything I'm hearing from you, and it's got to be an amazing role that you have. Your career sounds like it could really be fun, actually. Okay. So, my question is, why might meditation be considered a leadership superpower rather than just a conflict resolution tool?
Thank
And you
you.
mean
I'm pretty
mediation,
sure
right?
meditation is helpful as well.
Yeah.
That's a
Oh, I said
personal
I meant mediation. I'm sorry. I'm
mediation.
sorry.
So,
Mediation, not
yes.
meditation.
Well, NCRC actually started out in 1983 as the San Diego Center for Mediation. And actually, we need to be clear about the difference between general conflict resolution and mediation. So, conflict resolution is sort of an umbrella term or process or any method for ending a dispute. So you're using conflict resolution in your home on a daily basis with your children, in the workplace. But mediation is something very specific. It's a very structured type of conflict resolution where it must involve a neutral third party. So that neutral third party helps the disputing parties to communicate and to negotiate their own mutually agreeable solution. So I always say we let people think that we're going to help them to resolve the solution, but actually we help to guide people into coming up with their own mutually agreeable solution, after a whole series of listening, you know, figuring out what each of their needs are, and then say, okay, so based on what I've heard from both of you, what do you think might be helpful to help each of you to come to a mutually agreeable resolution?
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Mhm. So how do you decide when mediation is the best path forward versus another intervention?
I think mediation is the best path forward when you really need that neutrality. And I have to say, in looking at, what the topic was going to be, it's almost very difficult for a workplace leader
Mhm,
to just do mediation, because generally mediation implies that you do not have a stake in the outcome.
mhm,
And every workplace leader very much has a stake in the outcome. So, sometimes in a workplace, we're talking specifically about workplace situations, you might need to bring in an outside neutral party to help bring everyone together, to help facilitate a conversation so that it remains civil and productive, and where they each feel like they are very much a part of the resolution of the dispute.
mhm. Okay, thank you. So I think before we go into our next question, looks like we do need to take a break. But when we come back, we will dive deeper into this topic, maybe looking at some scenarios, and then also asking Kathryn to double click on some mediation skills that could be helpful for our supervisors. I think supervisors find themselves very often in that seat of having to help with help staff achieve resolution. So we'll be wanting to dive into what might be some skills that could help them to be as effective as possible in doing so. So please stay with us. We'll be right back with more on Leadership Matters, informing leaders, inspiring solutions. And we are back with more on Leadership Matters, informing leaders, inspiring solutions, and delighted today to be talking about mediation. And I think Dr. Dre is trying to share his screen. Dr. Dre, you're not in um, slide view. Did you want to go into? Okay,
Yeah.
great. Dr. Dre, I'm going to let you speak to the
Uh,
PowerPoint that you have up.
sure, sure. Can you see the wonderful offering? I mean, I'm so excited about this particular offering and to be doing this with Dr. White and Dr. Howard, strategies for dealing with conflict, a special 90-minute engagement, real leaders across the country, talking about strategies in terms of dealing with conflict, real discussion, real solutions, really some powerful pieces that I think folks can learn from each other as well. I always say, Dr. Loretta, Dr. Sheryl, and I are just we're kind of agitators to some degree. We'll offer up a few thoughts, add some overarching things, but this is really about you wanting to participate in a discussion that I think is going to be very meaningful. So we want folks to join us on June 26th. You've got the QR code there. You can quickly take a picture of that, snap that into your phone. Love to see you there. It promises to be a very powerful engagement. So looking forward to it. So I'll be there. Dr. Cheryl will be there. Dr. Loretta will be there. We hope to see you there too as well.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Dre.
Mhm.
Okay, so I think before we dive back into our conversation, we'll start in with our second audience question. And Dr. Loretta, I'll turn to you first for a response. So it says, I have staff members who are grown, yet they come to me expecting help to resolve their issues or conflicts with each other. I don't think I should get in the middle of things. So I just tell them to work it out. Now I'm being told I'm not providing enough support and doing my job as a supervisor. I disagree and I'm not sure what to do. Any suggestions?
Real lived experiences. I want to reflect on something that our guest Kathryn said about trying to find that common ground. I think the individuals do need to find a common ground. And you can't work things out all the time for adults, but maybe have like check-in meetings or something where you can sit with them and ask, what's going on or how are things working out, and try to share each of their perspectives, not really being a referee, but just kind of hey, let's get together, maybe some weekly sessions, see what's going on and how they could potentially work it out. But at the end of the day, I do like, again, what Kathryn says. So thank you, Kathryn, for your previous answer, because it's helping me with this one. It's like if you must have a mediation with someone with that outside perspective, I think, but I always find it an opportunity when adults just seem not to get along at the workplace because you're only there a few hours a day. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Loretta. Dr. Dre?
Yeah, I think, gotta be honest, I think all this becomes too much for a leader dealing with adults who can't get along and really trying to get to a mediation point. I mean, my first answer is just too much. Walk away and let folks know, work it out. I mean, that's the easy way to think about this. And probably years ago, I would have said that. And even today, from time to time, I do tell folks, work it out because you are two adults, getting paid quite well, being compensated quite well. Work it out. You get paid to do this kind of work, but putting on my leadership hat. I think key for me in terms of a much more sustainable path is certainly think about my coaching role, not refereeing, making sure I'm setting expectations up front, being very clear about that, and kind of offering a structured process when needed, right? Step in when you need it, document obviously as you need to do that too as well. But I always ask myself that question, is work it out a principled stance? Or has it become a default? And I think we have to examine that because if it's my default, I may need to stop as a leader and check myself and say, oh, okay, things are not working out. We're not achieving our goals. Outcomes are not there. And that's kind of what I've got to think about through that process. But I got to be honest with you, ladies, trying to deal with adults who can't get along, it is exhausting. Don't have time. but that's my side note. So
But it's your job if you're the
yeah,
supervisor.
okay, you say so. All right, thank you.
So
Right.
I'm going to say, Kathryn, your thoughts?
Well, I was going to say the same thing. I have to respectfully disagree with this particular supervisor scenario. And, actually, I want to acknowledge that workplace leaders right now are being asked to deal with more things than they ever have in the past. They're not just managing programs or projects or people. They're being asked to manage emotions. They're being asked to manage client emotions. They're being asked to de-escalate tense situations. They're being asked to effectively resolve disputes. And all of that is essential for building team strength, building trust, and building loyalty. So, absolutely, a supervisor's responsibility is to help people who are not getting along on their team to learn the skills and the tools for being able to get along in the workplace. It has become a part of a supervisor's job. So, it's going to strengthen their teams if they are able to manage conflicts, very well, which help to foster collaboration, to help to build a culture of respect in the workplace. So yes, they are unfortunately or fortunately responsible for helping to manage all of that. So it's not just managing peoples and projects and programs anymore. People are bringing their whole selves into the workplace. And yes, managing adults who can't just get along and do their jobs. That's sort of in the past now. People are bringing their whole selves, they're bringing their biases, they're bringing their personalities, their perspectives with them. So, yeah, supervisors need to be trained and armed to be able to deal with this so that their teams can move forward effectively.
Great. Thank you. And I would agree with parts of what each of you said, except for the it's not your job, it is your job. So
Yeah.
that is, I do believe that it's reasonable to ask staff initially to try to work it out amongst themselves. We do want people to try to resolve issues at the lowest level possible. That would be with each other. And when that's not successful, then that supervisor can be that conduit of trust. And a lot of times when open communication is not happening, it's because trust isn't there. And so the supervisor hopefully is that person that both parties trust. And so they can perhaps open up the lines of communication, ask both, what it is they want going forward, and try to support them coming up with some agreements as to how they want to be together going forward. So hopefully, as we move to the rest of this conversation, our supervisor will also develop some additional skills and thoughts about how they might handle bringing staff together to have difficult conversations. So thank you for that question as well. So with that, I'm going to, I think, toss it back over to you, Dr. Dre.
Yeah, I think again, I can certainly agree to all of that. I just think, Kathryn, you can chime in even more. I have a small issue with adults, not getting along and this whole conflict thing. I mean, we've been dealing with this since the beginning of time, and so okay, is it really all worth it in terms of the mediation, trying to sit down, trying to find structure, trying to agree, trying to lead? It's a lot. It's just overwhelming. So that's my side note. Kathy, you can certainly respond to that. But my other question is,
Well,
what?
before you go to your other question, that's
Yeah,
just for the record. The
okay.
only agitator here is the one that was just talking.
Oh, there you're
It's
starting
not
conflict
Dr.
again,
Dre or
Dr.
me.
Cheryl. You're
That's
starting conflict,
Dr.
Dr.
Dre is
Cheryl. No, 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 no.
Right.
Dr.
Help
Dre
us,
is the
Kathy. Mediate
agitator,
us
which we
here.
just saw.
We need mediation here. So,
I think when you've been in the workplace long enough,
yeah.
you see how it is evolving. And yeah, there was a time when supervisors and managers like, look, you guys go and work this out. You're grown adults. But it takes a little bit more nuance and a little bit more support in the workplace now.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, relationship management is part of supervisors'
I get it.
jobs,
I get it. Yeah.
right?
We
And
just got we
so,
just have so many different generations. I mean, I think about
mhm,
our
yes.
Zers and our baby boomers, moonlighters, Xers, millennials. I mean, everyone's fighting, everyone's pushing against each other. It can become overwhelming
Mhm,
as part of the process. And sometimes it takes a chunk of your time to just kind of work through that process. So that's all I'm
mhm,
saying.
mhm.
Can I just jump in
Yeah,
there and say
please.
something that Kathryn said, and it is very true. People are bringing their whole self to the workplace. We used to say, okay, whatever's going on in your personal life, leave it at the door. And when you come into the job, focus on the job. But they bring in their whole self, everything that's going on. And it's almost, there are moments I almost don't want to ask people, so how are you today? Because I'm trying to be nice because I might get a really long story and it's
Mhm.
like, I was just trying to be courteous. Now I got to hear all this. And now I need you to maybe go to EPA or something. It's beyond my control, but they are truly bringing their whole self and sometimes their family's self as well. So it takes a lot. It does.
Mhm.
So Dr. Loretta almost agrees with me here, and I'm sorry to digress. That it's kind of like it's a big waste of time sometimes to try to don't
I
bring your
didn't
whole
say it
self.
was a
Do
waste
not
of
bring your
time.
whole self to work. I
Answer
don't
your
want you to
question. It's
self-disclose
not a
like that.
waste of time,
Okay, all
but
right,
I just
okay,
wanted to acknowledge she's
all right.
right. They bring their whole self,
Yeah, you don't want folks bringing the whole self to work, and that's a whole
but
different
they
topic.
do. But they
That
do.
is
Okay,
another whole conversation I'd love
It
to.
is, right?
okay, all right. So Kathryn, what recurring friction points on a team might benefit from a mediated conversation? What kind of thoughts do you have around that?
Well, like I said, mediation is generally used when the goal is to repair relationships. So if there's a workplace dispute and when both parties are willing to communicate constructively to find a creative, mutually acceptable resolution. An example might be when two members have differing political views that they bring into the workplace. In this case, mediation could help each to come to an understanding of the other's why. Why do you feel that way? Why is this your political viewpoint? And develop an understanding and might help them to not dehumanize or to demonize one another for their differing political views. So I think a mediated conversation could be beneficial just to build that understanding and to help people to understand everyone has arrived at their political viewpoints or their personal viewpoints. It's been a journey for them. And why don't you learn more about them as a human being and their journey versus you believe this way, you vote this way, and therefore you're a horrible human being. So if that needs to be a mediated conversation, the facilitator, the mediator is there to help keep things civil, as I said earlier, and help them to think about things in a different way and look at things from someone else's perspective. And you often don't have the time to do that in your day-to-day work life, in your
Mhm.
day-to-day work life. I'll put a period on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then, Dr. Ray, I'll just say that another friction point that we are often seeing with teams sometimes is resources. Like there's conflict um, over resources, bottom line. But again, I'm hopeful that we'll get to some skills that might help supervisors mediate some of those conversations with staff and come to what Kathryn said earlier, some common understanding as it relates to how to resolve some of those differences. Another friction point we see quite often is personality conflicts. Just
Mm.
personalities are different, rub each other wrong, don't have enough self-awareness or awareness of the other person to kind of understand that we just kind of see the world differently. So our core values may be different and what we think is important and what someone else thinks is important might clash, but it's unspoken. So, so other things that might drive some of those differences. Dr. Loretta, you want to jump in? And I know you have another question at hand.
Okay, so Kathryn, can you recall a stalled collaboration or emotionally charged situation where mediation could have changed the outcome?
I think I can give an example where mediation did change the outcome. I actually mediated a dispute here in San Diego in the City Heights community, and it was actually a dispute between homeowners and a church. And the church had been very well established in the community for like 25 years. And with gentrification, as we know, came different expectations and desires for the new neighbors in the community. So the neighbors were actually pretty upset that the church was too loud on a Sunday morning, if you can believe that. And so the neighbors literally kept calling the police on the church. And so we had an in-person mediation where some of the neighbors and some of the church, leadership, we came together. And the neighbor said, I just want to sit in my backyard and read the newspaper, and drink my coffee and enjoy the quiet of a Sunday morning. And there's what they call noise, there's music, there's fellowship, there are cars coming in and out, and it's just ruining my Sunday morning, so to speak. And the church is like, we have been here for 25 years. This is a place of worship, where everyone is welcome. The way that you worship is not going to be the way that we worship. And they had done some things to help mitigate the sound levels. Um, and through that mediation, I think the neighbors were able to see to develop a little bit of cultural humility, meaning your way is not the best and only way. Just because in your church we have really quiet songs and the hymns, and it's very, uh, that type of fellowship, in other churches, another expression of worship and fellowship is going to be a little bit louder, it's going to be more engaged. And so help people to both develop cultural humility, my way is not the best and only way, and help the church say, what can we do to help be good neighbors? They had put all kinds of soundproofing in their church. And so in the end, they were able to come to a, a more better outcome for both of them. We will try to continue doing this. And the neighbor says, yes, we will continue to try to be more understanding, perhaps just be more understanding that my way is not the best and only way. People are not here to do harm. They're here to bring hope and fellowship into the community. And in the end, it did end very, very well. It was very interesting to me, that people didn't have that initial cultural understanding that the way you go to church is not necessarily the way other people go to church.
Mhm. Great. Thank you, Dr. Loretta. Thank you, Kathryn, for that response. Looks like we're up against another break. We will take a break, and when we come back, we'll dive into some skills and in this space, really ask Kathryn to maybe share with us some of the techniques that supervisors might hone in order to become better at helping to mediate conflict in the workplace. So when we get back, we'll hear more from Kathryn and Dr. Loretta, Dr. Dre, jumping in also with their questions and experiences on leadership matters, informing leaders, inspiring solutions. And we are back with more on Leadership Matters with the People's Doctors. Today we are discussing mediation, and with us as a special guest is Kathryn Shade, Director of Human Resources at the National Conflict Resolution Center. And also with us are my fabulous co-host, Dr. Undraye Howard, who we affectionately call Dr. Dre, and Dr. Loretta Howard. So really jumping into and maybe having Kathryn look at some of the mediation skills. I want to start with maybe the deep listening and going to have you talk a little bit about what is deep listening as relates to mediation and how might a leader get better at it?
Here at the NCRC, we teach a strategy called the art of communication, right? And that art stands for something very specific. So the A would stand for active awareness. Active awareness is recognizing style differences. And, in that particular training, we help people to recognize their own personal style differences. Are you an engagement style communicator? Are you, are you a person who needs more processing? Let me take a moment and I'll get back to you. Do you want to engage in the moment? Also, part of that is checking your bias, right? So everyone has a bias, and it's not a negative thing. Everyone has a foundational understanding and way that they organize their world, and understand that you have a bias in some way. And again, being able to acknowledge that and know that that has a part in your understanding of the world and other people, and being able to process your perceptions of the world and of other people. A part of that is also being able to respond respectfully. So I know I've talked about civility quite a bit. How can you respond to someone in a civil and authentically curious manner, versus dehumanizing people, wanting to be right versus wanting to understand, demonstrating understanding of what someone says versus your interpretation of what a person has said, asking open-ended questions versus yes and no questions, which tend to lead to you being prepared to prove them wrong. And then also being able to troubleshoot together. So now we have each told our perspective in a non-confrontational way. And how can we make sure that your interests and needs have been talked about? And importantly, being able to end on a positive note.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Dre.
Yeah, Kathryn, another skill set I know we've discussed is this neutrality. What's your thoughts about neutrality? Why is it important? And how might a leader get better at the skill of neutrality?
Well, as I said earlier, Um, a leader doesn't generally have the luxury of being neutral because they do have a vested interest in the outcome of a dispute. It impacts the team and their efficiency and their ability to collaborate and get the work done. So a workplace leader is not necessarily going to be neutral. However, they can learn the skills of a trained neutral or mediator so that they can help their teams to move forward, so that they can show that they're not taking sides for one or the other, but that they have the best interest of the entire team at heart. I do believe it's difficult to be completely neutral as a workplace leader. This is your job, and you all have a common goal. So you can develop the skills to help people to be able to communicate constructively, and for the entire team or the people involved in a dispute to be able to find a creative and mutually acceptable outcome.
Mm.
But yeah, it's almost impossible for a workplace leader to be neutral because they do have a common goal and they do have their biases. So they can work on not showing favor in particular, but talking about the common good of the entire team.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just say there are issues and there are concerns that may come up where a leader can be neutral because the conflict may be something that the supervisor doesn't care that much about.
Yeah.
Sometimes there are, and actually doesn't care, but it could be either way. It could fall either way.
Mhm.
Be it um, be it break schedules, be it lunch, that we kind of go along with break schedules, but maybe an event that the organization's having, and one person wants to do one event one way, another person may want to see it go a different way. So there can be some instances where the supervisor doesn't necessarily have a vested interest in the outcome to where they then can show up in a neutral way.
Yeah. But I also hear Kathryn saying, though, it's okay for the leader to take a side, though, so and take the points and
I did not
time.
hear that, agitator.
Oh, no,
Okay.
I'm before Dr. Loretta answers your question. I just want to make sure that we get Kathryn on the record, Kathryn, that it is okay and acceptable for a leader to sometimes take a side because what is right is right.
Well, we're not going to agree with that,
Okay.
but we will say that I think it's important for leaders to be authentic in the sense of state their truth. And that may align with one person or the other.
Okay.
Um, and I think that we can support leaders in developing mediation skills. And there may be some things that they can mediate. It doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't going to be times when they will need to have a third party mediator actually help to mediate. Um, if that answers the questions, I'm going to just rename you Dr. Agitator.
All right, Dr. Cheryl.
Uh,
Dr. Shade says is important. Sometimes
mhm,
I think, I mean, I agree with both of you. Sometimes if there is one common goal, then achieving that goal is going to be the right thing. And I think maybe having some flexibility on how to get to that goal
mhm,
together is going to be the role of the supervisor or the manager to say, this is your style of doing that. This is his style of doing that. Neither
mhm,
way is necessarily wrong, as
mhm,
long as we know that the common goal is, completing this project or this, this program, whatever, but that people have different styles of getting to that.
Okay,
And they
thank you.
might prefer a particular style, one over the other, but be able to maintain that neutrality. I'm not going to tell you your way is wrong, but everything needs to be efficient, professional, and respectful in getting there.
Yeah. Thank you,
mhm. Thank
Kathryn.
you. Dr. Loretta.
Okay, Catherine, speaking about being neutral, I want to talk about it in the sense of emotionally neutral. So, how would you stay or advise a leader to stay emotionally neutral when personally they do relate to particular side of a conflict? Is it possible for them not to be or to maintain emotional neutrality?
I think, as I said earlier, everyone comes in with a particular bias. I think it perhaps does take some training for people to, as a leader, to not bring your emotions into it. So you're going to have to check yourself all the time. You're having one conversation in your head that is emotional based. And then the actual conversation that you're having with your team should not be based on your personal emotions about a particular topic or subject or individuals. It should be fact based, it should be productive. it's it is almost impossible to, you're bringing your emotions with you, but as a leader you have to be able to check those and make sure that your bias is not just spilling all over the place, where one person is feeling like you're saying one thing but your body language or your tone is really bringing your bias to this conversation, and that breaks trust, that you're authentically want to help them move the situation forward because you really do feel one way or the other. So again, that's a skill. That's a skill that you have to develop. You can express opinions, but they shouldn't be so one-sided that one person feels like they're really not being heard.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the word that kind of comes to mind for me, Dr. Loretta and Catherine, as we describe this, is just that not that you're not going to have emotions, but to regulate them. So, how do I show up in a way where I have enough emotional intelligence to
Yeah.
be self-aware, to self-regulate those emotions? So, thank you. You know, there's another skill, Catherine, that we often hear connected to mediation, and that is reframing. So could you share a little bit about reframing and how a leader might be get better at reframing?
Sure. So reframing generally will refer to, you know, taking a negative and reframing that so that it is productive and action oriented. So, for example, if you're doing an annual review, and I'm in the middle of annual reviews right now, any constructive comment should include some indication of what better might look like. So you're going to pair an observation with a direction or an actionable thing that someone can say, oh, okay, there's a measurable outcome for what better might look like. You might say, going forward, instead of saying, this year you did all these terrible things. You might instead reframe that to say, this was successful, and going forward, I would like to see more of this. Or the expectation for next year would be that we do more of this, that you're able to come to me or someone if you need more support. So make sure that it is productive and action oriented versus just an observation. You didn't do well last year. Well, tell me what doing well might look like and how I could measure that.
Thank you. Dr. Dre?
Okay.
Yeah, I like that. Um, and I know we're going to hopefully have some time for the rapid fire for Catherine because I want to see how conflict and mediation comes together in that context as well. So, um, the other piece, Catherine, I mean, this is excellent. I mean, you really hit on a lot of great points. I think it's going to be helpful for our listeners and leaders across the country. But what helps you kind of reframe conflict in the moment so people feel heard rather than judged? Because a lot of times people do want to feel heard rather than be judged. What helps one reframe conflict in that moment when that takes place?
One of our core strategies is to help people understand when people are complaining, the complaint represents what is not being revealed is what their need is. So if someone is complaining, this person doesn't respect me, this person treats me in a particular way, what they're really saying is, I need to be respected and I feel disrespected. So helping each of the parties to understand the need of the other person. If you say, like in media, we do a lot of community-based mediation. And in community-based mediation, someone might come in and say, this person's dog barks all day, and I have to work at night, and therefore I have to sleep during the day. And it's not that they hate the neighbor or that they hate dogs. Their need is that they need to rest and sleep so that they can be effective and get their rest and,
Mhm.
do their jobs. So we help the person, the dog owner, understand what this person needs is some peace and some quiet so that they themselves can go to work and earn their money and be refreshed when they go to work. So help people to understand the need of the other person versus the complaint.
Mhm. Thank you. Dr. Loretta?
So earlier you gave us, Catherine, that acronym for ART as when you're helping people with conflict. So I just want to know, are there other structured dialogue or what it might be and how can it be helpful and how can leaders get better at that?
There are a lot of strategic ways and structured dialogue that people can learn very, very effectively to help them be effective leaders. We offer a whole variety of different trainings across different sectors for emerging leaders. So let's say you have a person who is new into leadership and they've been peers with someone and now they have been elevated. How do you learn to become a leader with people that you've perhaps been on the same level with before? So there's trainings around how do you become a leader and develop that respect with someone that you've perhaps been on the same level with. We have, you know, all kinds of different trainings around, you know, bridging differences, around respectful communication and what that might really look like. Yeah, there is definitely a whole variety of structured dialogue and how you can structure that dialogue so that it is inclusive, so that each party feels heard, and that it's leading to a very constructive outcome for the individuals and the whole organization, really.
Mhm.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, thank you. And I found that the basic, like mediation structure itself can sometimes still lend itself in being helpful in a workplace where a supervisor or leader or whoever's helping might introduce that I'm going to, each party will have some uninterrupted time to talk about, like you said, Kathryn, their need. And then there may be some interrupted time where we're actually making sure that each party's hearing each other in that process. And then we may go to a process where we might just try to ask one person at a time on one of those needs, you know, can we get agreement on that? But by structuring in that way, sometimes a supervisor may be able to help to lead a person forward. I think the other piece that comes to mind is um, saying we're going to just first talk about get an agreement on the issue and some basic understanding. Now we're going to explore some options, and then we're going to come to some resolutions with regards to evaluate the options. But structure in that way can also be helpful. Looks like I don't know if we're going to have enough time for rapid fire, but what I will ask is maybe each of us to just share a final thought. And maybe before we do that, Kathryn, one of the questions we're asking all of our guests, Dr. Dre, I'll have you ask that question,
Mhm.
and then we'll maybe do some final thoughts on this topic.
The question we've been asking is about the younger self. If you were to give your younger self some advice today, what would that advice be?
Is that a question for me?
Yes.
The answer for me would be I should have learned the tools of National Conflict Resolution Center a long time ago. Once
Right.
I did, start doing this work, we also do a lot of restorative work and restorative practices, which is all about building relationships,
Yes.
community building. That was kind of life-changing for me. My younger self would have benefited from understanding that my style of communication, which happens to be engagement style, is not the best and only way
Okay.
to communicate with others and to understand that people have different ways of communicating and no one way is better and being receptive to that. Um, to have cultural humility. My way is not the best and only way of doing anything, whether from communicating the way that I work, my expectations, it's not the best and only way, the way that I worship or anything. There's another different way of doing things. We're all very set in what we have learned to do growing up. A lot of us come from very engagement style backgrounds,
Mhm.
but there are other ways with communicating with people than being highly engagement.
Right.
Great, thank
Right.
you.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Loretta, any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listening audience?
Just that something that Kathryn talked about a lot, and I'm a firm believer in that, for everyone to realize that we do come to all situations with our own biases. And if you can identify that and then try to talk to the other person, learn their differences, because our lived experiences are so different. So that is really important to recognize. They don't necessarily do it the way you do, and we all have biases. That's the first step for me.
Thank you, Dr. Loretta. How about yourself, Dr. J? Final thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think all this has been great. I wish we could have I call her Dr. Kathryn on for another hour or
Yes.
two, because I love to pick her
Yeah.
brain even more. So I just, not trying to be sarcastic, there's a lot of work that goes into this, the whole mediation, the willingness to come and talk and have a discussion. It's a lot for a leader in today's workplace, and it's trying to figure out how, where do you start? How do you set the framework? How do you set the expectations? I think it's just a lot of investment, but worth it at the end. It really pays off. So, but just a lot of investment up front too.
Mhm. Great. And then I know we're ending, but Kathryn, if our listening audience wanted to get in touch with you, how might they go about doing so?
Well, if someone were particularly looking for training for their organization, right? Do you want to train up your leadership team? Do you want to train up your entire team? Someone can reach out to us directly at training@ncrconline.com. You can direct your questions there. Hey, I'm having this issue within my team. Do you guys have a training that would benefit us, to build a stronger team? Uh, yeah, and again, we have such a variety of different trainings, communication skills trainings, available for organizations, for community-based organizations. Um, we have something for everyone across all sectors and all disciplines. So, learn how to have difficult conversations, learn how to be an upstander in a bystander situation, learn how to give and receive constructive feedback. We have very powerful trainings that impact the way people are in the workplace and in the
Great.
community.
Great.
Thank you. Well, thank you for sharing that information. Thank you for being with us today. And of course, thank you to our co-host and to our listening audience. Please join us every Wednesday live on YouTube at 2 p.m., or you can download our podcast and listen on demand. New episodes drop on Thursdays, and where you can find us on Apple, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and Spotify. So until next time, keep on keeping on for the greater, making your leadership matter.